What's up, everybody? Peter X, the Coffer here, and welcome to another episode of All Things Music. So the title of this episode is called "To Take the Throne," and little play on Jay-Z and Ye's album back in the day that they did together. And I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, so yeah, take the throne. So what's this about? Well, you know. Recently, I did the episode of Kendrick Lamar versus Drake, and a lot of people believe, hip hop fans in the streets that, it was about Kendrick Lamar taking the throne from, and many folks have crowned Kendrick Lamar the winner. And I did a whole episode, and I said, Kendrick Lamar is, clearly one. I said, eventually if Drake gets his act together and, goes back to being King Drake, he'll also be a winner, and both will be a winner. But, a lot of people assume that Kendrick Lamar, you know, part of the big three, Drake, Kendrick Lamar, and J. Cole, was trying to, take the throne and be the king. Well, I mean, Kendrick Lamar wisely, took embraced Prince and took that crown, so to speak, and wisely so, because he does in today's hip hop scene fit into that. But, Prince was never gonna, Prince never even tried to, take down Michael Jackson, because, ultimately when it comes to the throne, it's about, who sells more records and who has more, top 10 and number one hits. And so, look, the Stones versus the Beatles win that fight. Michael Jackson versus Prince. Michael Jackson wins that fight. Now, does that mean, the Beatles and Michael Jackson are better? No, but, when it comes to music historians, you got to rely on the data, and that's the data. So, to piss off some Kendrick Lamar fans, I think Kendrick was trying to, brand himself, get a stronger brand in this attack, and he definitely, succeeded in doing that. And, separating himself from, from Drake and J. Cole, and he did that. So I think that's what this is about. Yeah, so this is going to be fun. This came out, I was like, well, how exactly do the kings and queens, the folks on the throne, and specifically selling the most music and, dominating the Billboard charts, how are they usurped? How are they toppled? So quickly, the first king was Frank Sinatra, and what happened? Elvis Presley came along, a new generation, new music. Rock and roll out of the blues. Frank Sinatra was a lounge singer rooted in jazz, and so jazz, in the certainly in the late 40s and early 50s, stopped being the dominant music, and became quote unquote old folks music, and Elvis was the king of that new stuff. So that's step one. Elvis is the guy for a while, and then the Beatles come and they take the crown from Elvis. And so, why did that happen? It's a little more complex with Elvis. Well, number one, he went to the army, and he kind of lost his momentum musically when he went to the army. The other thing is he was doing movies in Hollywood and got, sucked into the Hollywood scene and forgot, the music, and that's why people initially fell in love with Elvis. And so, and And the third thing, I mean, it was a new generation who wanted their own heroes, and the Beatles, were their heroes, and Elvis was their, maybe not their parents' hero, but certainly their older siblings' hero and whatnot. So yeah, so the Beatles come in and take down Elvis, and the Beatles, rule. And, they broke up, the Beatles. I mean, that's the biggest thing that happened. But even if they didn't break up, I sort of, in my, teams episode, Team Building 101, I talk about, um, number two, Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, and a harder form of rock and roll was coming. And again, it was sort of it was a little bit of a change in taste of music. So the Beatles, even if they stayed together, I think they would have. I think Zeppelin and still rules the '70s of the Beatles, because people just, I mean, you look at the '70s, it's a harder form of rock and roll than what the Beatles were doing, and I don't think the Beatles. I think they lose that fight with Led Zeppelin. Because if you just look at the trends in rock and roll, there's you have Deep Purple, you have, Sabbath along with Led Zeppelin. I mean, that's where rock and roll was going. That's what the younger baby boomers wanted. So, in rock and roll, through the '70s, Led Zeppelin rules the rock scene, and then they lose the crown, so to speak. I mean, the big thing, obviously, is the drummer John Bonham died. But, along with that, I mean, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant were growing apart. Punk was rising, and punk was, Jimmy Page was notorious for his guitar solos. A lot of them were good, but, Whole Lot of Love live, sometimes you just got lost in some of those guitar solos. Unlike, Black Sabbath, it's interesting. I was just reading earlier today where Geezer Butler talks about, how the punk bands in the late '70s had respect for Black Sabbath, and vice versa. Sabbath, respected them, and Geezer Butler, was like, well, they had a faster tempo, but we were still, one of the critiques that the punk folks had of the rock of the '70s is noodling and just soloing for the sake of soloing, and Sabbath never did that. I mean, you can argue a little that at times Jimmy Page did that with Led Zeppelin, but the punk scene did take, they really didn't like Pink Floyd, and I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan. They didn't go after Led Zeppelin as hard as some of them went after Pink Floyd, but certainly Led Zeppelin was in their sights. And so, that's the second thing that sort of led to Led Zeppelin's downfall. And the other thing, there's just a new thing going on. I mean, Judas Priest was rising in England, a different type of thing than what Zeppelin was doing. And then, hair metal was coming. You had, arena rock that was, in the late '70s was starting to meld rock with pop. And I'm thinking, Journey and Foreigner and REO Speedwagon and Styx. A little bit, Queen, sort of is in arena rock, even though, they're probably the godfathers of arena rock. And I'm just kind of, as I'm riffing, that's just a revelation that I just realized. But yeah, hey, but those arena rock folks made a lot of money, marrying rock with pop. And so there's a lot going on in the late '70s. And again, if John Bonham doesn't pass, does Led Zeppelin go on and do well in the '80s? I don't know. Page and Robert Plant had enough of each other. I don't think Led Zeppelin lasts, honestly. So who usurped, Led Zeppelin? Well, A lot of people, but I'm gonna, you know, uh, of the new rock scene, I'm gonna, kind of, pin it on Motley Crue. I mean, Motley Crue, they turned into a hair metal band by the mid '80s. But that first album, Motley Crue, is I think it's Too Fast for Love. I mean, it's a hard rock album, but there's a lot of punk in here too. And their second album is rock. It's harder than Arena Rock, but there's some hooks there too. Um, but did Motley Crue ascend, and were they that group? No, they shared. They did very well, but there's a lot of other rock groups, in the early to mid '80s that were doing well too. So they didn't take the throne, so to speak, but they have all of the elements that in their music at the time, and from 82 to 84, their first two albums that kind of exposed, some of the weaknesses in Led Zeppelin. So I'm, rolling with Motley Crue. So sticking in the '70s, so in the R&B soul side, James Brown ruled. I mean, the Godfather of soul ruled the '70s, along with Marvin Gaye. If James is R&B and funk, Marvin Gaye is soul. Well, Marvin Gaye passed, unfortunately. So that's Marvin was doing very well, in the early '80s, with Sexual Healing was a smash, after, bouts with drugs in the late '70s. I think Marvin Gaye, if he lives, he does fine, because I mean, you still have Freddie Jackson, you still have Luther Vandross that come up in the '80s. Even I'll Be Sure. I mean, there's a lot of balladeers, doing very well, doing what Marvin did. And Marvin was the first of the great of this new era of balladeers. I mean, you had Sam Cooke and Otis Redding, as contemporaries in the '60s with Marvin Gaye. But he kind of, comes out of the, unfortunately, both Sam Cooke and Otis Redding passed. And so he comes into the '70s, kind of, carrying that mantle by him, as his own. So yeah, I mean, Marvin passes, but I think Marvin does very well in the '80s, if he lives. James Brown, on the other hand, two things happened to James Brown. Disco in the late '70s, mid to late '70s, and I'm a disco fan. I mean, I have another All Things Music episode just on disco. James made the mistake of trying to jump on the disco train rather than being, the godfather of funk that he was. I mean, didn't look good. I mean, come on, dude, pretty much you and Sly invented funk, and then disco comes along. Yeah, disco was making more money. I get it, but it wasn't a good look. And then the other thing that kind of, 1978. Rapper's Delight's release. So, I mean, there's two things that sort of take James out. Now, as the '80s, once the sampling era comes along, James wisely, unlike disco, James wisely, embraces sampling and lets the folks, sample, the classic rap era, the late '80s, early '90s, and embraces sampling and is the guy again, and hip hop, single-handedly, reinvigorates James Brown's career. But the '80s, come on, who's the dude in the '80s? It's Michael Jackson. Yeah, Michael Jackson dominates that. Prince is there, Madonna's there. I'll deal with Madonna later because she's the, Michael Jackson is the king of the '80s, and the first half of the 90s, then, Madonna's the queen. And yeah, well, I'll talk about Madonna as an interesting journey, a little more interesting than Michael, but I'll talk about Madonna in a minute. Yeah, so, but by the mid 90s, Mike, this is a good almost 20 years. 79 is Off the Wall and Dangerous is his last. I remember when History comes out, even though he had some big songs in it, a lot of people had moved on. So, by about 94, 95, 96, the end of Dangerous, Mike is, he's moving into that legacy category, whether you like it or not. Well, what was going on at the time? Well, hip hop became the dominant music genre in black music in, the late 80s. And by the mid 90s, hip hop is becoming, and this is also post grunge. And so hip hop is the cool thing. Now, is it outselling everybody else? Maybe, maybe not. Is it out charting everything else? Maybe, maybe not. But, country's running really strong. This is Garth Brooks, in the mid 90s, and you have these country acts that are, it's the golden era of country, when it comes to the pop charts. So, but hip hop is the thing. And so really hip hop takes Michael Jackson down. And it's a lot of folks, it's not one person, but I'm going to, shine the light on one person. That's Jay-Z. Jay-Z's, is coming out at this time, it's the mid 90s, and at some episode down the line, I'll get to this, but Jay-Z, he's in the game 20 years, and here we are 20 years and Jay-Z's in the game, and you still you can't ignore Jay-Z when he drops new music. You just can't do it. He's still relevant. He's still relevant. Is he Drake? No, but he's not, you still have to pay attention to him. He's still important, so to speak. And even the young folks, he's still, he's Jay-Z. So, he was the biggest of the post-classic era. He's the first big one. And then Lil Wayne comes along too. And then you get after Lil Wayne, you get the big three of Drake, Kendrick Lamar, and J. Cole. So now Madonna. Madonna's a very interesting, case, because if Michael Jackson's the king of pop in the 80s, Madonna's the queen of pop, and Madonna's reign lasts for a long, long time. And really, she does not get knocked off the throne, in my opinion, until Lady Gaga comes out in the late 2000s. I think Gaga drops in 2008. So why was this? She actually Madonna mentors, Britney Spears and passes the baton at one of the awards shows with the Kiss. And and unfortunately, Britney Spears had, ran into a lot of issues that derailed her career, unfortunately. Really nice lady, Britney Spears. It's unfortunate. I know, we live in a culture now where folks, ridicule, performers, entertainers and stuff who fall in hard times. But, Britney Spears didn't do anything to hurt anybody. It's unfortunate. I'm a fan and I respect her. It's unfortunate what she went through. But, but 2008 rolls around and, here comes Lady Gaga. And, they're both doing EDM. And, Lady Gaga just goes, finds that those next boundaries that for whatever reason, because Madonna always pushed the boundaries and it always, but Lady Gaga found new boundaries. She blended, Madonna with Grace Jones and David Bowie and added those wild looks along with her very good music. So yeah, the interesting thing is there was a rivalry there for a reason, for a while between the two. I mean, go listen to the song from Madonna, She's Not Me, and I believe that was on the Hollywood album or the album after that. And Madonna was still putting out really good, the Hollywood albums about this time. The music album, she's still putting out really good music for a while, but Madonna may have been able to actually retake the throne again but she changed musically and moved away from EDM, and of course Lady Gaga has moved away from EDM too. Madonna probably should have kept her flag planted, but Madonna probably got bored. I mean, she's doing EDM. I mean, she's like Prince and the great ones, eventually they get bored. Even when it's working, they just get bored and need to do something new. So yeah, that's the story of Madonna. I mean, Lady Gaga was of a new generation. She spoke to a lot of the same issues, particularly the LGBTQ community, that Madonna did back in the 90s, but she just had a different way of doing it and connected even, more strongly with this younger generation, her quote unquote little monsters. Now, interestingly enough, Lady Gaga did not take Madonna's throne. She quickly got out of, she still will get up in her get-ups. I just saw a picture of her today on Facebook, and she had, she had on, one of her wild costumes. She doesn't do that as much anymore. So who are the queens now? I mean, Taylor Swift and Beyonce. So just because someone takes you down doesn't mean they actually get the throne too. So yeah, but interesting. So, I mean, now who are if you just talk about the big three overall in music, to me, it's Taylor Swift, Beyonce, and Drake. I mean, the numbers there don't lie. All three of them, when they put something out, it almost always charts in Billboard. And when they hit the road, particularly Taylor Swift and Beyonce with their tours, I mean, they're stacking the cash. So, I mean, those are the measurables, and that's what, music historians look at. The interesting thing is I don't see anybody coming for these three right now because, and again, I'm not buying the fact that, Kendrick Lamar's end goal is to replace, Drake. Because he's going to have to, change his writing style and stuff. I don't think he wants to do that. I mean, historically. I mean, he has his own unique writing style, and I love his music. But to be blunt about it, Kendrick Lamar is still an acquired taste when it comes to music. He's not pop. But there's, I mean, the record companies are struggling mightily when it comes to breaking new acts. And there's other things going on, around the music industry that is very problematic for these record companies that I will, in the next weeks and months talk about. And it's indicative of I mean, the big 3 or 4 record companies pulling their music off of TikTok. And well, part of it, they said publicly, we're not getting paid. And no, TikTok was not paying. They were paying the performers, but not the companies. But the other problem was, and in early May they put their stuff back on there. Didn't say why, didn't say what the settlement was. But the other problem was TikTok. With TikTok was the record companies could not figure out the algorithm. So, again, there is nothing released on why Universal and Sony and the other big companies put their stuff back on here. But I mean, did TikTok, crack open the vault and be like, yeah, here's the secret to the algorithm? Or did they just agree to pay them? Who knows? It's a very interesting settlement. And I know that the record companies wanted that really badly. So, yes, but the record companies, again, I did an episode probably about 6 months ago off of a Billboard article from October, November of 2023, where, record company and AR folks and record companies were saying, like, we're going to have to scale back expectations for these new acts because we don't, there is no blueprint, clear blueprint to break acts anymore. And we don't, we can't make heads or tails out of TikTok's algorithm. So yeah. So that's what's going on. And I'm glad I did this episode. Been looking forward to it. This was, kind of came together pretty easily. I mean, the outline came together real quickly, but so yeah. Let me. I'm been working on honing my conclusion here. So, a couple things. I need you to hit the like button. I need you to subscribe for the channel. And hey, leave some comments. I love to hear what you have to say. Discussion's always good. In college at Purdue University, I did teach in African American Studies. Haven't been going back to this skill, but I was not a lecturer. I was, big into classroom discussion. So, hey, we got the discussion thread here on YouTube, so use it. And I might learn something, and maybe some issues will be raised that I can. Oh yeah, let me think about these issues raised, and I can come back and do an episode of that. And anyway, but hey, I got 5 albums my own are on here on my YouTube channel and also on all the streaming services. And I have 2 science fiction fantasy novels and a novella on Amazon. My books are under Peter Exodus O'Coffer, and my music is under Exodus, Xodus. So thank you again for coming through, and I will see you next episode.